For those of you that have joined us previously, welcome back. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we're glad to have you here in doing that. So today we're going to talk about mentoring for diversity and inclusion. And some of the things that we're going to talk about is enhancing your diversity and your business strategy with mentoring and how you actually can do that and how others have done it. We're going to talk about various types of mentoring, and not only are we going to talk about them, but we're going to give you a definition of those types and then actually take you through some case studies of how our clients have used these various types of mentoring in their organizations. And then what we're going to do is give you some launch tips for diversity-oriented programs that are supported by mentoring. So before we begin at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our first poll?
My pleasure. Our first poll: do you currently have a mentoring program in place? If yes, what is that goal? Take a few seconds to answer that. Okay, we've got about 50% voted so far. Give this a few more seconds. Let anybody else who wants to go ahead and answer. Okay, looks like we got 82% of attendees to answer. That's great. Poll is closed. Let's share the results. 38% said yes, they currently have a mentoring program in place. The goal is career development. 4% said it's for diversity. 16% said they have one for leadership. 13% said it's for skill development, and 29% answered that they do not have a mentoring program. What do you think, Judy?
Well, I would say that what we're seeing is pretty typical of what we see with our clients, that many of the mentoring programs that we talk about are for career development in what they're doing. So thank you very much for voting, and thank you, Blake, for handling that. Okay, one of the things that we want to do is, as we go forward, is talk about a quote that came from a study that was done just recently as it was produced. It was from Burson and as part of the Deloitte Learning Organization. And basically the report had to do with predictions for 2016. And we thought this one was absolutely so important. Diversity and inclusion have moved from a compliance program to a business strategy. We're talking about the fact that this is no longer a government compliance program in what you're doing. It's past that. It really is a business strategy in what you're doing. And what I'd like to do is talk to you about what our definitions are as we work with diversity and inclusion. First of all, we believe diversity talks about everyone being different and everyone being an individual in what they're doing. It covers gender, race, culture, age, ethnicity, whatever you want. It covers these things. It's about everyone in doing that. Because we all have a diversity of skills, a diversity of communication styles, a diversity of perspectives and ideas. We're all individual and we're different. And leading that to inclusion means that everyone belongs. Everyone feels respected and valued, and they're supported through energy and commitment from others. And also, inclusion is a process by which organizations take full advantage of their diverse talent, thinking in terms of everyone. You know, mentoring achieves maximum inclusion in a diversity and inclusion program by making diverse talent visible to both managers and leaders, and also providing employees with access to development opportunities outside of their direct unit. Now, we talked about, inclusion being everyone. And when you look at this, many times we have a tendency to think of managers and leaders as separate from employees, and we forget about the fact that our managers and leaders are employees also. So again, it needs to include everyone as we go forward. Here's some of the advantages that we have seen with our clients around diversity and inclusion. First of all, these organizations have greater innovation and creativity. They also have enhanced employee productivity. And it kind of stands to reason if there's greater innovation and creativity, there's going to be enhanced employee productivity. And if there's increased engagement, you're going to get creativity and you're going to get productivity. Also, one of the things that we see more and more having to do with an organization's brand and its social capital. In doing that, it becomes very important. It becomes important for organizations to be able to recruit and to be able to retain individuals. And, all of that creates revenue gains and, again, creates increased retention. One of the things, if all of these things are going on, you've got great employees that are creative, productive, and engaged, and you're going to retain them. That automatically is going to mean that you have a better place in the marketplace because your employees are not only promoting your organization, but they're doing the best for your organization with your clients and what you're doing. So let's look how mentoring supports diversity in going through that. So if we've talked about the fact that diversity and inclusion is important, then how mentoring supports that diversity? Well, first of all, it provides access to a wide network of skills across your organization from all cultures and backgrounds. It doesn't keep it all in one area. It also gives an access to a network of valuable content for ongoing career opportunities that many times an individual might not normally have access to if all they're doing is kind of looking for those opportunities right within their own little work group. It helps organizations share information across different cultures in doing that. And one of the things that we find that's very important is that mentoring helps to break down those silos that we know exist inside of every organization. Because again, you're looking at information sharing across different cultures, wide distances, and therefore it reduces possible biases to other cultures and other genders and other races and other age and so on and so forth as we go forward. Some of the commonalities that we see in organizations that have successful mentoring programs that support their diversity and inclusion program is they make the business case for how mentoring does support the diversity and inclusion initiative. Also, they make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of the mentoring roles, that mentors are clear about their role, mentees are clear about their role. And don't forget the managers. The managers understand what their role is and what they should be doing to support the mentoring partnerships. Leadership then promotes the initiative, and not just talking about it, but they actually do actions and they have meetings and they promote the initiative, not just through talking or emails, but they actually are involved, maybe not as a mentor or mentee, but they actually are involved and they promote the initiative. And then they make sure that everyone understands the benefits of the program as they go forward and in what they're doing. So these become important, as well as being able to identify reports and measurements and provide resources and programs that, build support and provide support to what you're doing. Now, at this point in time, what we'd like to do is, Blake, can you take us through our next poll?
Certainly. Our next poll question, how do you match your mentors and mentees? Do you match on the basis of career level, their department or location? Maybe we have a gender, race, or competencies-based process for matching. Okay. Going to give that a few more seconds. Great. Results are in. Looks like 19% said it's on the basis of career level, 30% on department location, none on the basis of gender, 1% on the basis of race, and 49% based on skills and competencies. Judy, what does that tell us?
Wow, that's interesting as we're going forward. I honestly felt that probably be more on career level in doing that. It was, in there, but that kind of surprises me. But it is good to see that it's based on skills and competencies in doing that. And here's why that's important. Because one of the things that we really hope, let's go back to that definition of having to do with diversity, that everyone's equal. So we're not making those matches based on those things, but what is the development, what's the knowledge an individual needs no matter what in doing that. So thanks for that. That's really great in doing that. Appreciate that. Okay, well, let's go on, and what we want to do now is talk about some different types of mentoring that we have seen really assist a diversity and inclusion program in doing that. And to begin with, we'd like to talk about distance mentoring. And distance mentoring is where you've got mentoring partnerships that are geographically separated. Now, this doesn't mean they have to be across a globe. They could be across a state, they could be across a country, they could be across a city. Think in terms of some of our very large cities that we have. And part of what you can have is you can have people within a city that are separated by 30 miles in what they're doing. So, but the point is, they probably aren't going to be meeting face-to-face very often, if at all. Then another type of mentoring we see is reverse mentoring, and this is where the match is based on years of experience. And one of the misperceptions around reverse mentoring is kind of automatically thinking in terms that this is based on age, and we're saying no, that's not true. It's more based on the years of experience within a organization in doing that. Third way that we look at it is team mentoring, and this is where the mentees have multiple mentors, or a mentor may have multiple mentees in what they're doing. And we're going to talk about all of these in more detail in just a moment. And then you have the more traditional one-to-one matching in what you're doing. And, if this is around diversity and inclusion, then the match should be first based on the individual skills. And you just told us that many of you, that's what you do. 49% say that one-to-one match was based on, around diversity, was based on skills. And then find out, does the mentee then want additional things? Do they, this is based on skill, but I'd like to have someone in my own culture, someone in my own gender, whatever that might mean. So, before we get too far into these types of mentoring, what I'd like to do is to talk about our definition of a mentor, a mentee, and mentoring. One of the things that we always talk about is, the good news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And the bad news about mentoring is it's thousands of years old. And because of that, there are so many different perceptions and historical misperceptions regarding the concepts of what a mentor is, what a mentee is, and what mentoring is overall. So this is our definition of what we say a mentor is. We believe a mentor is an individual with specific knowledge or experience in a given area expertise who's willing and able to share that knowledge with another. Now, the two most important words in that definition are willing and able. The willing part means that the individual in the mentor role is making a commitment and is committed to the development of the mentee and what they're doing. The able means that they actually have the skills to be a mentor. They've got the communication skills. They've got the interpersonal skills. They've got the relationship building skills. They've got the coaching skills to actually carry out that role of a mentor. One of those historical misperceptions around mentoring is if somebody was really good at what they did, they'd automatically be a good mentor. And we're saying, no, that's not true. It takes very different skills to be good at doing something than it does to be able to share and impart and develop individuals in that knowledge or experience area. So again, what we're talking about is that the individual in the role of mentor actually has the skills to be a mentor in doing that. Now, the mentee then is the individual who is seeking that knowledge or experience in what they're doing. And what we're talking about here could be that the mentee themselves could have gone to an education course, it could be from the university, it could be several ways in which they have obtained the knowledge, but they really need to understand what's this look like in a real-world experience in what they're doing. So the mentee could be an individual who seeks the knowledge or the experience, or both, in what they're doing. And then mentoring is bringing these two individuals together for development. And it's very important to understand that in this case we're talking about development. One of the historical misperceptions again around mentoring is that if I'm in a mentoring partnership, I'm gonna get promoted. And we're saying no. We believe mentoring is totally about development. And if that development helps the individual to take on more complex assignments, notice I didn't say promotion, I said taking on more complex assignments in what they're doing, then that's great. But the focus of mentoring should be development in what they're doing. Now, the other thing it's interesting about this, and you've probably heard me use this term already, is that this is a partnership. It's not just a relationship, it's a partnership in which we find, as we have worked with organizations for 25 years, that one of the most common comments that we hear from the mentors is they're surprised how much they learn from the mentee. They're excited about how much they learn from the mentee. And so when we provide training for mentors and mentees, we want the mentors to be open to that, and we want the mentees to be open to sharing their knowledge and doing that. So again, as we go forward, those are the types of things that we look at when we're talking about the definition of a mentor or a mentee in what we're doing. So now what I'd like to do is to talk about some of those focuses of mentoring and how we've seen organizations use it. So the first one, reverse mentoring, is the use of a mentor, and it could be at a younger age, but that's not the only criteria. They might be at a lower position within the organization in what they're doing, or they've been with the organization for a shorter period of time than what the mentee has. So you've got the mentor is younger, at a lower position, or has been with the organization lesser period of time. And the mentee then is the individual who could be lower in the could be at a higher level in the organization, could be older, or could have been with the organization longer in what we're doing. So now, one of the examples we have is there were senior levels of the organization, and they were learning about social media. And this was specifically around age, it was around position, and it was also talked about many of these mentees had been with the organization for a much shorter period of time. But the point is, these senior levels were learning from these younger mentors about social media. And you might come up and you might say, well, they could have gotten that in a training class. And you're right. But they really wanted to understand. It wasn't just somebody telling them what the differences were, telling them about social media, but really understanding how it's used, walking through experiences and examples of how it was used, and also really understanding how social media could benefit the organization. And we even had a situation that one senior leader talked about in which they were giving a talk, and the younger mentor was actually helping them with this talk to make sure that they positioned social media much more clearly in what they were saying. Another example is we had senior levels within the organization, and they ended up being the mentees also. They had normally been with the organization, much longer. And the mentors were individuals who were much newer to the organization. They hadn't been with the organization for very long. Now, this had nothing to do with age. They just had not been a part of the organization for a very long period of time. Now, what happened was senior levels, they'd been with the organization for so long, they'd forgotten what it was like for onboarding and bringing new people in, and what was that experience like, and how could they have made it different. Now, again, they probably could have sent out a questionnaire or a survey and gotten some information, but that wasn't the same as actually going through and experiencing with these individuals who were the mentors, who had been, were either brand new or fairly new to the organization, and kind of going through it with their eyes and their experiences and what they were doing. That really gave them an update as to, what it was like to be new in the organization. So again, reverse mentoring was a great way for them to learn that and going through. Now, another way we want to look at mentoring is what we call distance mentoring. And again, it's the use of a mentor who's not in the same physical location as the mentee. And again, we aren't talking about across a globe or across a country. It could be a situation where individuals are across a city. We also have seen this used where both the mentor and mentee both traveled a lot. And so chances are it was very difficult, because they both traveled a lot, for them to meet in the same location in doing that. So the way one organization used this is there was an individual who was sitting in New Jersey in the States, and they were paired with a mentor that was in France. And the reason for that was there were certain areas of the organization that the mentee that was sitting in New Jersey would never have experienced had they not been paired with this mentor that was sitting in France. Now, I have to tell you that in this particular situation, this one was New Jersey and France, but they were spread out all over the world. And many times there was a little bit of concern from the mentee, like, okay, I need to have my mentor right there with me. It's not going to work unless they're right there with me. And they're a little bit concerned, but they went forward. Now, at the end of these partnerships, the comments we got, both from the mentors and the mentees, but especially from the mentees, that feeling that, I never would have gotten to know that part of the organization or people in that part of the organization if it hadn't been for this distance mentoring partnership. There was so much they could learn that you just can't learn unless you're kind of right there. And today, with video conferencing and the types of meeting software that we have, such as what we're using right now, and cameras that are on your computer, all these types of things, people can meet from all over the world. And that really becomes important. Now, another example was a situation in which we had a mentee that was sitting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you talked about the fact that you did a lot of your matching on skills in doing that. Well, this particular mentee that was sitting in Albuquerque, New Mexico had some specific areas that they needed to develop in. And, chances are there might have been a good mentor that was right there in the Albuquerque or New Mexico area. But the very best mentor for this individual was sitting in India. I guarantee they never did meet face-to-face, but they certainly met quite often. Again, using all the technology tools we have and all those things that are at our fingertips to do this. So many times it's the difference between having a good partnership and the very best mentoring partnership in what you're doing. Another kind of mentoring we look at is what we call team mentoring. And again, this is a situation where it might be that the mentee has more than one mentor, or a mentor has more than one mentee. So a couple of examples on this one. Let's start with the fact that the mentee has more than one mentor. There was an individual that actually was going from Mexico to corporate offices that were in the States in what they were doing. This is, she knew the English language and so on, but this was a big step for her, and she took this, and she was a, Hispanic female in doing this. Actually, she had 2 children and so on, so there was a lot of adjustments for her in going there. In this case, this particular individual from Mexico had 3 different mentors that helped her. Now, one of those mentors was another female that was, a little higher in the organization, had come from, had come up through the ranks and worked with the mentee to really help her understand this is what the organization's culture is all about. And being a female in this organization, these are the kind of things you want to concentrate on. These are the kind of things you want to do. In addition to that, that particular female, mentor, because they understood what it was like to have 2 small children and what they were doing, helped the mentee in that way. It was absolutely phenomenal. The individual from Mexico could have stumbled around, or they could have help from a team. Now, the second mentor that this individual mentee had actually helped her with career development opportunities and what it was going to take to develop herself in ways so that she could move through the organization. Not necessarily always vertically, but also horizontally. What were some of the types of projects and the types of areas she wanted to get involved in? So the second mentor she had was around career development. Now, as she was having this mentoring partnership with the career development mentor, the career development mentor also began to realize that one of the skill areas this particular mentee needed was around budgeting and forecasting. And I can tell you that, she knew from surveys, she knew from as long as she'd been in the organization, she knew from things that were going on, budgeting and forecasting was a real need inside the organization, and also was an area where people just weren't developing as the organization needed it. So with this, finding this out, this mentee, female mentee, also had a third mentor that could help her specifically in the area of budgeting and forecasting, because that was going to be very important to her career as she went through. So again, in this situation, you had a female mentee who had a mentor that helped her with culturally through the organization and what it was like to be a female in the organization. She had a career development mentor that helped her in the best assignments and the ways to get involved in areas for her career. And then she had a third mentor that was very specifically around a skill that was needed. Now, another example had to do with a mentor who had several mentees. And these mentees were dispersed all over the world. There was a couple in the U.S., there was one in France, there was one in Germany, and then there was one that was in the Far East. So this mentor had a lot of different mentees in a lot of different areas. And what the mentor was able to get out of this was they got a much broader view of the organization as they were going through. What happened for the mentees, because again, this was a situation where, the mentees were, working with individuals throughout the world. One of the things that they talked about at the end of this was the fact that I can't believe how much I got to know other people in the organization. And in addition to that, was really great to learn about other cultures, to learn about how our organization really worked in other cultures. One of the things that we had worked with the mentor on, and they actually did as an opening exercise, was they had everybody talk about their perceptions of the other cultures. So the individual from Germany talked about their perception of individuals from France and perception of individuals from the US, Far East, and so on, and each mentee went through that. So it was interesting at the very end when all of these came through to repeat these back to the mentees. And part of what they found out is they had a lot of misperceptions about other parts of the world. But the mentees felt it was really great because they all had similar areas of development that they needed, and they got that development. But they also got to expand who they knew in the organization, how they felt about other cultures and parts of the organization, and it was really positive all the way around in doing that. So again, now here's what the mentor got out of him. The mentor's comment at the end of these partnerships was they had no idea about the leadership talent that existed within the organization. So again, mentors got something out of it, or mentor got something out of it, and the mentees got a lot out of it as it was going forward. Then let's look at that traditional one-to-one mentoring where the pairing is specifically one mentee to one mentor in doing that. And here's a couple of examples how this worked. Talk about inclusion. Remember we talked about the fact that in diversity, everyone is individual and different, and inclusion was that everybody belongs. Well, this organization really put that inclusion part together. And they took mentoring all the way down to the manufacturing floor. And these were individuals who had never been a part of anything like a mentoring program. I mean, they went through training in things like, the particular machines, or they went through training on safety or whatever it is, but anything like mentoring, to get involved in that kind of program, they never had. And these were individuals who had been with the organization, it could be they'd been there 2 years, or they could have been there 25 years in what they were doing. And I'm telling you, when we went through training with the mentors and the mentees, they were so excited that they were included. And those were incredibly successful mentoring partnerships in doing that. But again, great use of inclusion, taking it through all parts of the organization, again, all the way to the manufacturing floor. Now, another example was we worked with an organization that specifically wanted to help individuals who kind of met what was looked at that time as a diversity focus. And again, these individuals, they wanted them to learn those skills and competencies that would allow them to move into more complex assignments. Once again, notice I didn't say promotion, I said complex assignments. So what they did was they went through and they actually conducted assessments to find out the specific areas, and then they were able to match the mentees and mentors together, and also asking the mentees, though, okay, here's someone that meets all your skill requirements, and then, but would you like to have someone of your own culture or age or so on? And based on the fact that the technology tool the organization had allowed the mentee to do self-matching, they were able then to match on a couple different levels in what they were doing. Again, results were very successful. So what does this mean to an organization's bottom line? Well, we kind of talked about some of these, but again, it gives an organization greater innovation and productivity, enhanced employee productivity, increased engagement, increased retention, and again, that organizational brand that makes individuals want to come to work at that particular organization. It makes them one of the best organizations to work for. And then again, if all those things are in place in what they're doing, then they're going to promote the organization. And in addition to that, they're going to be the best employees that you can put forth to your clients and your customers, and you're definitely going to have revenue gains in what you're doing. So thinking about that, what does it mean to the organization's bottom line, and then how could we measure some of these things? So when we talk about measurements, we believe you should measure things in terms of quality and quantity. Now, when we talk about qualitative data, you're really doing this in terms of how people feel about the program. And most of the time, these types of things are handled through a survey or an interview of some kind, but it has to do with how people feel. Did they like their match? And did their managers for those mentees see a difference in how the mentee was performing or whatever it might be in doing that? But you also want to make sure that you can get quantitative data for your measurements. And, a couple of the ways that you could do that is think about the number of individuals that actually participated. And, was this more than you actually thought? And it's not unusual for us to find out that they were going to start out just doing maybe 20, 25 pairs, and the next thing you know, they have got, 200 people that have applied that want to be a part of the program. In fact, I just had a conversation with someone last week about that very type of thing. The number of hours spent. Now, we're not talking about just any hours they spent together, but if you've looked at specifically around things like the goals that they were set, and then the number of hours that got the mentee to those goals, that can begin to tell you the number of hours they spent, the number of quality hours they spent. So also, what was the percentage of goals that were set by the mentee that were met? And then we've also seen a lot of organizations do measurements by the ability to accelerate that learning curve, because individuals could learn faster by having a mentor than they could by just trying to learn it on their own or only learning through a training class or something like that. We actually, with one organization, was able to reduce the learning curve from 18 months to 13 months in doing this. And then also, another way you can measure this quantitatively is how many individuals re-enrolled. Now, when you're looking at this kind of measurement, think about doing this over maybe a 3-year period, because you could have individuals that were mentors or mentees in one phase of your program, and then they're out the next time, and then they join back up maybe later in what they're doing in doing that. And also looking at how many mentees became mentors, how many mentors decided they'd like to be a mentee. And we see that quite often, that there are individuals who were in a mentor role and they decided they'd like to have that individualized attention. So they become mentees in their learning. But we believe you should have both qualitative and quantitative data, because if you've got a situation where everybody likes the program, but you've not got any return on investment for the time and energy and dollars you've spent, it's not a good program. And if you've got really good quantitative data, but nobody liked it, you still don't have a good program in what you're doing. So some of the ways that Insala has been able to help organizations to, get this type of data and, be able to use it, be able to really support their diversity and inclusion program, to be able to report on it. From the user standpoint, it's that matching and pairing. And really, it can be a situation where the mentee can do self-matching on what they want to be able to do, which leads to a strong amount of engagement and commitment in the partnership. Or, they could be matched based on some suggestions from an administrator in what they're doing. The mentee may say, I haven't got a clue, who I could be matched with. Can you help me? And the program administrator can help what matching might be available. And by having a learning plan and goals in place, there's a direction and a focus that the mentee and mentor have in their partnership, and then the mentee and mentor can track exactly how the mentee is progressing in achieving those goals. And then also the way Insala has helped through their technology is what we call flash mentoring. And this is the ability to look for a mentor based on some keywords and what you're doing. So it's a situation, I might be looking for someone in project management, and I've got a problem. Or I might bring it down to project management software. and finding out what somebody has had as experience and being able to do that. And, especially in a large organization, it might be hard to find those types of mentoring partnerships that only are going to last for a very short period of time. Or it could have something to do, I know that in one organization, it happened to be in the medical field, they were looking for somebody who specifically was working on a type of research in what they were doing in taking this forward. So that's how Ensala's technology can help, from the user standpoint. And then from the administrator standpoint, there definitely is a workflow that the administrator can put together and be able to track. There's a survey tool, and again, being able to run those survey tools within a technology and not having to go outside to use another technology can be very helpful. The administrators being able to communicate on a large-scale basis and mass emails and having emails that go out periodically based on certain triggers, whatever that might be, such as, for everybody that has been with a mentoring partnership in 60 days, just automatically gets an email to find out if they set their goals and objectives in doing this, whatever that might be. And then also reporting and tracking. I recently had talked with someone, and they talked about the fact that it was the reporting and tracking they loved the most, because previously they had been doing everything on spreadsheets. And when somebody asked for a report, now what they could do was, it took them like about 15 minutes, where before what they had to do was to take about 4 or 5 spreadsheets and put them all together and then come up with another spreadsheet for the reporting and the way it went. So this gives you an idea of some of the things that you would see in our technology, and you can see how you actually can manage your program. You've got a quick snapshot of exactly how many mentors and mentees are matched. You can see things like, you can set up your program to say every mentor can have X amount of mentees, every mentee can have X amount of mentors, all the ways in which you can do that. And the other way in that matching and pairing, which we find is one of the biggest things that individuals would love to be able to have, and putting together application questions so that individuals can do this self-matching, or an administrator can help. But the point is that matching and pairing really becomes important. So at this point in time, Blake, would you take us through our next poll?
For our final poll, what is the biggest problem you've encountered tying mentoring to your diversity program? Okay, going to give that a few more seconds for the last few to trickle in. Okay, results are in. 24% said it was communicating the program message. Another 24% said it was defining the measurements for success. 36% indicated it was finding enough mentors is the biggest problem. And 16% said it was identifying matching criteria. What does that tell us, Judy?
Actually, that's kind of interesting. I'm not surprised about the 24% on the measurements, because that's one that always comes up. Finding enough mentors, yes. And for those of you that looked at that and was saying that was one of your issues, I would love for you to please go to our website and go to our previous mentoring webinar, and we actually talked about how to find enough mentors in doing that. So if you would please go to our website under resources and under webinars, the webinar we actually did in January was around some of the ways to find enough mentors. But yeah, that can be a real issue in doing that. Okay, so in getting your next steps together, okay, what are we going to do in doing that? So we actually follow a process. We have a strategic planning workshop that put together, and we follow a process called plan, implement, evaluate, and manage. And believe me, make sure you got a plan first. So when we're talking about the part that's in the plan, make sure there's a project document. Don't just roll the program out and assume it's going to, be okay. Make sure you've got a project document that looks at the organizational objectives, your measurements, your goals, schedule of events, all these types of things that, need to be in place before you roll out your mentoring initiative. And then when you are in that phase of implementing, make sure you can qualify your mentors and your mentees, train them, match them properly based on those business objectives. Make sure there's a program administrator for the initiative, because if there's not, then there are issues or problems. The mentor-mentee partnerships will kind of make up their own answers on this. And then in the evaluate stage, make sure that you've got a way to track exactly what's going on in the program and be able to report that, and again, both from a qualitative and a quantitative focus in what you're doing. And then when it comes to manage, your best bet is having a technology tool to be able to do this. You certainly can do it with spreadsheets, but that can kind of be a little cumbersome after a while, depending on the size of your program. And what we believe is the technology tool keeps your program from becoming what I call not just an administrative problem, but sometimes an administrative nightmare. And when that happens, your program can fail in doing that because it's just too cumbersome, everything that you're doing. So some of the things we really hope you took away from today was, number one, mentoring achieves maximum inclusion by having diverse talent being visible to managers and leaders, employees having access to development opportunities that really are kind of outside of their direct work unit and what they're doing. That it leads to a more diverse and inclusive culture and affects the bottom line. And we talked about all the reasons how that happens, being more productive, retention, and all of those things that lead to the bottom line in doing that. And then probably one of the most important things, and it was a little bit at the end, but we want you to think about this. Have a plan in place before you start rolling this out. Don't start your program without one. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through some of the questions that have come up?
It'd be my pleasure. So the first one is actually about reverse mentoring specifically. So in reverse mentoring, how can you help the mentor feel confident when they're working with a senior manager in the organization?
That
could be kind of intimidating.
Yes, it can, and it's a really, really good question. And quite honestly, part of it is going to be on qualifying your mentees in that. We talk about qualifying your mentors, you need to qualify your mentees. In that particular case, the mentee needs to understand what their role is. They're in that role to develop and learn in what they're doing. Now, again, we talked about the fact it's a partnership. We want them to share their knowledge. But it's very, very important that there's some type of a role profile, like a job description, for the mentees in that case, and they, they understand that they're in that role to learn in doing that. And all you can do is coach them, that mentee, in doing that, and say, how would you feel if you were in that situation? Wouldn't you feel intimidated? So, don't do things like pulling rank or making comments that are going to make that individual who's in the mentor role feel bad. We've seen situations where it didn't work, where the mentee was just, they weren't qualified to have mentoring and reverse mentoring. We've also seen situations where the mentor has told us that they were a little intimidated going into this, but the mentee went straight into this role, wanting to learn, and what happened with the mentor is they begin to realize, wait a minute, this is my area of expertise. I'm the subject matter expert in this area that the mentee wants to learn in. So it began to build confidence that way. It's a good question. Good question.
Thanks. Okay, so what are your views on a distinction between an organizational sponsor and the mentor? So should at any point the mentor get involved in trying to help place the mentee or guide them into position?
One of the things that we do when we provide training and we do our strategic planning workshops is talk about the difference between a coach and a mentor and coaching and mentoring. And what we're finding, though, more and more now is going to that next step. So then what's the difference between a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor, and coaching and mentoring and sponsoring? And I can tell you where we come from is the fact that chances are a sponsor doesn't get involved in development. They network, they help the individual network, the sponsoree, they help them network, they help them meet people, they help to, in some ways, promote the individual. Now, when I say they help to promote the individual, I don't mean that they actually advance that individual in their job title. What I mean is they put them in the positions so that they are, they get to know people. People get to know them in just all the right places in the organization and doing that. So what we see many times, again, the main focus of mentoring is development. Now, a mentor may share their network, and they might even be talking to someone, and because they know this mentee so well and their skills and so on, they might kind of suggest them for a role. So I'd say it's much more of a situation where a mentor may do some sponsoring. A sponsor seldom does mentoring from a development standpoint of really helping an individual develop. And they're more, like I said, kind of introducing the individual. Now, should a sponsor or a mentor, either one, try to promote from the standpoint of the mentee in, bigger job, other job, whatever? No, we don't believe they should. Now, the mentor or the sponsor, either one, might have information about a job role or position or function the mentee would be qualified for and pass that information on to the mentee or the individual sponsoree. But it's got to be real clear that the mentor or the sponsor is not responsible for that mentee's promotion or moving to another. They certainly can provide information. They can suggest if they're asked. They know the individual. But it's important, I think, to make that distinction. Hopefully that's clear. It really is confusing between a coach and a mentor and a sponsor and coaching and mentoring and sponsoring. And it's important, if you've got that in your organization, that you are very clear and make those distinctions.
Thanks, Judy. Looks like we're actually about out of time. Judy, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think the biggest thing that I want to let everybody know is that diversity and inclusion, it's as much about inclusion as it is diversity, and making sure that you're clear that diversity and inclusion have become a business strategy. They're not a compliance program anymore. And when you put together your mentoring program to support your diversity and inclusion program, make sure there is a plan in place. We offer, again, a strategic planning workshop that we believe is vital to an organization before they roll out a mentoring initiative that's going to support diversity and inclusion, or any mentoring initiative in doing that. So I'd like to thank everybody for their attention and their participation today. And Blake, any last words from you?
Nope, that'll do today. So thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you'd like a copy of today's slideshow, you can find a link to it on our Mentoring Thought Leaders Club page at LinkedIn today. And if you'd like a recording of today's webinar, you can find it on Ensala's website at ensala.com/webinars. If you have any further questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email us at info@ensala.com. We very much value your feedback on our webinars. So thanks again for coming, and have a great day.